We can map the geography of the human brain down to the microscopic level. We can trace the valleys of the cortex and follow the electrical storms across a dense forest of 86 billion neurons. But knowing where the firing happens doesn't explain how physical tissue actually produces the feeling of being alive. This is the hard problem of consciousness. Neuroscience can track the mechanics of a thought, but it cannot locate the exact point where biological matter transforms into subjective, phenomenal experience. To find that crossing point, mathematical physicist Roger Penrose proposed looking far below the level of the neuron. He argued that the origin of awareness must be a bottom-up process, rooted deep in the quantum realm. Along with his collaborator, Stuart Hameroff, he formulated the Orchestrated Objective Reduction Theory, or ORCHOR. They suggested that discrete moments of consciousness are triggered by quantum collapses happening inside microtubules, the microscopic structural skeletons of our cells. On the opposite end of the spectrum is Carl Friston's free energy principle. This approach views the brain from the top down. It models the entire cortex as a macro-level predictive engine, constantly working to minimize the surprise of incoming sensory data. Both frameworks require a multi-level biological architecture, yet they rely on completely different physical laws and operate at opposite scales. The scientific field remains split between the quantum behavior of single proteins and the macrodynamics of the whole brain. The observer-dependent theory of everything, or ODTO, offers a structural resolution to this split. Instead of trying to pin subjective experience to a specific physical coordinate, ODTO defines consciousness as a specific mathematical geometry. It is a stable loop of self-observation. To be clear, this observation loop is completely distinct from Giulio Tononi's integrated information theory. While both theories share similar mathematical symbols, ODTOE maps a dynamic cycle of action and closure, rather than measuring an information network. According to this framework, that exact self-observation loop is invariant. It repeats identically at every level of biological nesting, from the smallest proteins to the whole organ. In this light, Penrose and Friston are both right. Their theories coexist within the same hierarchy, representing different recursive depths of a single, unified process. This diagram illustrates a single moment of awareness in ODTOE, built from a full turn of a mathematical loop. That cycle breaks down into two distinct half-steps. The first half-step acts as the observation phase. This is where Friston's predictive coding operates. The brain predicts incoming data, corrects its errors, and guides the system toward a specific configuration. The second half-step is closure. This aligns with Penrose's concept of objective reduction. It is the exact moment when a field of potential states collapses into a single definite reality, returning the updated configuration to the start of the cycle. The harshest critique of Penrose's original quantum theory came from physicist Max Tegmark, who demonstrated that quantum coherence should collapse almost instantly in the warm, wet environment of the brain. But ODTOE renders this physical limitation irrelevant. The geometric necessity of the loop, the sequence of observation and closure, holds up whether the underlying mechanism is driven by exotic quantum gravity, thermodynamics, or classical biology.
The architecture begins at the smallest operational depth of the brain, level D0. This occurs deep inside the tubulin domain of a single microtubule. This phi scaling governs how the brain's architecture stacks upward. Starting from the foundation, the loop iterates at specific mathematical intervals, building progressively larger structures. Microtubules act as the elementary loops that build the synaptic level. Stable synapses build neurons. Coherent groups of neurons form cortical assemblies. The identical observation operator repeats at every stage. Connecting these layers is a strict law of decaying entanglement. Adjacent layers, like a microtubule and a synapse, are tightly bound, but the mathematical link drops exponentially as the physical gap widens, leaving distant levels largely insulated from one another. This precise degree of separation allows the nervous system to maintain vast autonomous subsystems while ensuring they can still integrate into a singular entity. This hierarchical climb eventually arrives at the largest biological scale, the unified cortex. Here, the system reaches a critical threshold of depth, granting it a property called reflexivity. The observer gains the capacity to fold its operation back on itself, observing its own act of observation. In the ODTOE framework, an observer that can maintain this continuous reflexive cycle without breaking apart establishes a stable fixed point. Sustaining that stable fixed point, armed with the reflexivity of the entire cortex, is the mathematical definition of phenomenal human experience. But as this close-up reveals, the geometry contains a structural flaw. The loop of self-observation is mathematically incapable of perfectly closing. The two ends will always miss each other by exactly pi-3 squared, creating a spiral gap of 2%. This mathematical constant translates directly into a biological prediction. Even under optimal conditions, the human brain will fail to seamlessly bind sensory features together roughly 2% of the time. This inherent gap serves a functional purpose. Without a perfect connection, the system is forced into a state of continuous movement. Because complete closure is unattainable, the loop must generate another cycle. That relentless pursuit of closure is exactly what we experience as the continuous stream of consciousness and the forward passage of time. If this mathematical architecture scales fractally across the golden ratio, it raises an inevitable question. Does the expansion stop at the physical boundary of the human skull? ODTOE posits a collective field, extending the framework beyond the individual. It describes a space where the cognitive coherences of multiple human beings interact and combine. When individuals align tightly enough, their independent loops overlap. They scale up into an egregore, a multi-observer system acting as a single, unified meta-observer. Just like the cortex emerges from a network of cellular operations, this synchronized group maintains its own stable fixed point. It establishes a literal shared field of collective consciousness. Under this framework, awareness is a fundamental geometry. It is a single, repeating act of observation that echoes from the microscopic proteins in our cells to the shared mind of humanity.